Is your diet worth cheating on? Once you get engaged in fitness, you are forever tracking. I like to utilize many different styles of diet. You may want to be careful on how you traverse a cheat meal. If you mess around with fire, you might really get burned. I got some bad news and I got some bad news. Your diet is forever and you can't have any cheat meals ever. I want to get into this topic of cheat meals because I find it to be super fascinating. And I want to also share with you guys that I don't pretend to have all the answers. As I share some of this stuff with you, I'm really just proposing a lot of questions. And that's the stage of life that I'm in now, is I'm doing my best to not make as many statements, period. And I'm trying to turn them more into having a question mark at the end of pretty much everything that I say. So that way you guys can decide what's best for you. Let me take a stab at this and let me see where we can get to today on this idea of cheating. I would first off like to maybe define what it may mean to cheat on your diet. And also I want you to explore whether it's worthwhile for you to cheat on the particular dietary rules that you follow. For some people, they may be able to get to a spot where they get to where I'm at, whereas I do no cheating on my diet. And I'll explain that as we go along here today. First off, I want to say that if you are on a carnivore diet and you eat a piece of bread, we can say that's cheating. If you're trying to subscribe to a tribe and you're trying to be carnivore AF and you eat a thing of broccoli, you're off the team. You're not carnivore. You cheated on your diet. If you're carnivore and you ate some fruit, you're off the team. You're now doing something slightly different. If you're keto and you eat a thing of pasta, that's cheating on your diet. If you are someone that counts calories, there's no form of cheating other than what? Anybody know? The answer would be going over your allotted calories for the day. If you go over your allotted calories for the day, or even if you're on a bulk and you miss the calories, you're under the calories, that's cheating on your diet too. I've heard bodybuilders go as far as to say that if they didn't eat their 7 meals that their coach told them they had to eat for the day, that was the same as eating a cheat meal. Pretty wild, right? They ate 6 meals and they fell 1 meal short, and the coach blew up and the coach was like, dude, what are you doing? Speaking of bodybuilding diets, one way that a bodybuilder can easily cheat on their diet is not only to go over their overall calories, but also would be to ingest too much fat when they're in prep. A lot of times bodybuilders will plummet their fats down quite a bit, 40 grams, 50 grams, 60 grams, even for some of these gentlemen, for some of these guys that get on stage that are monsters, that are 220, 240, 250 pounds on stage, completely shredded. Some of those guys are having next to no grams of fat with each meal throughout the day because they're trying to spread some of that fat throughout all the meals that they're having, 6, 7 meals. There might only be a gram or 2 of fat in each meal. So that's why these guys eat tilapia. That's why you may have recently heard Wolverine talking about his preparation for the movie he was in recently, Deadpool versus Wolverine, where Hugh Jackman had very, very low amounts of fat every single day. I think he was a little confused about how many calories he ate. Some of that sounds to be somewhat fictional, but the results, you see the results in the movie. Maybe there's some CGI involved or whatever. Bottom line is the guy looked amazing. He's not 20 years old. He was completely shredded. And he did so by following a very low fat diet and probably just a low energy diet in general. I want to back things up a little bit and say that as much as I don't always love the idea of counting calories, I think no matter what diet people are on, once you get engaged in fitness, you are forever tracking. You are sort of forever tracking your calories without even really recognizing it. Because for me, while I may not track my calories the same way, I'm a person that has always enjoyed low carb eating. I used to enjoy a ketogenic style diet. I don't eat quite that same way anymore because I just don't need that amount of fat anymore, or at least I don't believe that I do. And so I lowered the fat grams, and I don't have a 6-egg omelet with a bunch of cheese and a bunch of bacon and a bunch of sausage. However, I can do that, and that doesn't have to be a cheat. And let me explain why. It's because I like to utilize many different styles of diet, and I'll utilize them to my advantage as I see fit. When I travel, for example, a lot of times I'll be on a ketogenic diet. Meal by meal, I'll have a keto meal after keto meal, protein and fats over and over again. I'll eat cheese because it's super convenient to travel with, string cheese, little blocks of cheese. I'll have eggs. Eggs are 1-to-1, much like cheese, 1 gram of protein per gram of fat. However, when I'm on vacation, I still enjoy other types of food, and I still will enjoy a sandwich. I still will enjoy this. I still will enjoy that. So I will break the ketogenic diet for that, but stay with me here. It's just for a meal. It's just for an occasion. It's just for like a thing. And normally, if I'm being a good boy, I'm executing pretty well on exactly how I'm doing that. So I think for me, one of the biggest things for me has been to reframe the way that I look at a cheat meal and the way that I look at cheating on the diet in general. I want to say, this is really important, what I'm about to say right here. If you are obese, if you are well over 50 pounds overweight and you have really struggled with your nutrition for a very, very long time, if as far back as you can remember, you've been on the heftier side, you've been on the huskier side, and in your life you've been ridiculed and teased and made fun of for your body weight and all these different horrible things that can happen to people, you may want to be careful on how you navigate, how you traverse a cheat meal or even like a cheat day. You may have to be really cautious. And this is where there's some strategies and some tactics that can really be helpful in going into a cheat and going into a cheat meal. But before I get into some of that, I want to address this idea of, is your diet worth cheating on? What are you cheating for? Like where do cheat meals come from? I think cheat meals came from bodybuilders. I don't really know their origin. I'm not exactly sure how to look it up. But I believe it came from bodybuilders being on restrictive diets that were maybe for prep. And then maybe they discovered, maybe them and their coach started to discover, wow, you fill out pretty good when you have this refeed or this cheat meal. And for some real reason, when you talk to ninjas, when you talk to a Chris Aceto or somebody like that, or Hani Rambod, some of these high level, really, really high level, they coached all the champions that have pretty much ever existed in bodybuilding, even like a Charles Glass, all these guys, they'll actually say that they notice a huge difference between an actual cheat meal and somebody just going over their calories on clean foods, as if it doesn't work the same way. And it seems like we don't really understand the mechanisms behind why that happens. I don't know if Chris Bumstead eats this way, but just using him as an example, since everyone knows exactly how Chris Bumstead looks. Some people say if a dude like that has a blueberry muffin along with some ice cream and along with a little bit of pizza, while they're on this like 1,200 calorie a day diet normally, they get this huge influx of fats, huge influx of sugars, and they specifically and purposely eat, get ready for this, everybody, highly processed foods. They have these highly palatable, highly processed foods, and boom, they wake up the next day and they look absolutely insane. Why is this happening? What the hell are the mechanisms behind all that? I don't really know. But I do think that that's where the idea of the cheat meal originated from, was from bodybuilders trying to mess around with their diet, manipulate their diet. We know ketogenic diets and low carb diets have been around for a really long time. In fact, we know that there's bodybuilders in the 70s and 80s. I believe Arnold and a bunch of other guys were following pretty low carbohydrate prescriptions for a handful of days, and then they would carb back up. Handful of days and carb back up. So they would deplete, replete, back and forth. And people started to call this kind of stuff a refeed because I think that people didn't want the person they worked with to be gluttonous and end up at a buffet and end up just eating everything in sight. And so I want to go back to, it's really going to be dependent upon the person.
For years on this podcast, we've been talking about the benefit of barefoot shoes. And these are the shoes I used to use back in like 2017, 2018. My old Metcons, they are flat, but they're not very wide and they're very stiff and they don't move. That's why we've been partnering with and we've been using Vivo barefoot shoes. These are the Modus Strength shoe because not only are they wide, I have wide ass feet and so do we here on the podcast, especially as our feet have gotten stronger, but they're flexible. So when you're doing certain movements, like let's say you're doing jumping or you're doing split squats or you're doing movements where your toes need to flex and move, your feet are able to do that and perform in this shoe, allowing them to get stronger over time. And obviously, they're flexible. So your foot's allowed to be a foot. And when you're doing all types of exercise, your feet will get stronger, improving your ability to move. Andrew, how can they get their hands on these?
Yes, head to vivobarefoot.com/powerproject and enter the code that you see on screen to save 20% off your entire order. Again, that's at vivobarefoot.com/powerproject. Links in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
If you're someone that struggled with your weight all the time, if you mess around with fire, you might really get burned. And this little spark, this little quick little thing you wanted to do that was going to be cute and going to be fun and going to be exciting, you were going to go to that place that makes those ice cream sandwiches and double stacked on cookies and they put whipped cream on top and you can get toppings on there. And you're going to go there with a friend or a buddy and that was going to be a fun thing to do. And you go there, you're 300, I used to be 330 pounds, so I'll use myself as an example. I go there with my buddy who weighs, 185, who's 6'1", and he downs the thing in 10 seconds. Like, man, that was great. But maybe what people aren't realizing is that on my drive home is gonna probably be quite different than my buddy that's 185 pounds that's in shape. He satisfied the thing that was in his head. He was excited about this. I satisfied some of those things in my head, but all it does now is it wakes up the monster. We poked at the monster, we poked at the devil, and now it's awake, and now it's time for payment. And so even the diet that I was doing previously, even if it wasn't super strict, I'm now kind of thinking that I'm on board with thinking that my diet's been so tough, thinking that my week's been so tough. And this is why I talk so much about stress mitigation. The way that we handle stuff and the way that we interpret stuff is the number one thing for your health. Nothing even comes close or nothing even compares to it in any way, in my opinion. So the way that we interpret our stresses, if we're interpreting our stress or we're interpreting the diet to be really difficult, now it's easy on that drive home to go, man, for a few minutes to go, man, I'm really stuffed. And then to go buy a Dunkin' Donuts and go, oh my God, I already cheated on the diet. I already sliced one tire. I might as well slice all the rest of them. That's from my friend Jordan Syatt. He says, it doesn't make any sense. You go out to your car and you look at your car and you go, oh my God, my tire's sliced. Somebody stuck a knife in the side of my tire. And you're like, okay, let me get out my knife. And now I'm gonna continue to slice the rest of the tires. That's what it's like when we have this cascade of disciplines that are sending us in the wrong direction. It's like, man, you already may have caused a little harm just by having a little bit of fun, because maybe for the position that you're in currently, maybe you can't afford to do that. But now you went from having an extra 1,500 calories or an extra 500 calories, which might not register ever anywhere for you. It might not register in weight gain. It might not register in people noticing that you're bloated the next day. It might not register in you having almost like a carbohydrate hangover the next day. But now you decided to stop and get some peanut butter cups, some fish food, Ben and Jerry's. Why am I so specific with these things? I've never done this before, right? Now, I used to be in this category big time, and I would The cheat day was something that was preset. I would say, all right, every Saturday. When I was younger, it used to be every Saturday and Sunday. I'd cheat on both days. And that actually worked for a little while because it was like have a cheat meal or two on Saturday and have a cheat meal or two on Sunday. But then it turned into like an event. It turned into, okay, I'm still gonna lift that day. I would lift, and then the rest of the day I would like load up on a bunch of junk, and I would spend a lot of time doing that. Each person's gonna need to be a little careful with how they cheat on their diet. And for me, when I was younger, I would have, every Saturday I would cheat, and then I also did every Saturday and Sunday. But that worked out pretty good because it was pretty minor. Saturday would be like 1 or 2 meals, and Sunday would be like 1 or 2 meals. And it would be kind of innocent. I'd have maybe a couple slices of pizza on Saturday. Maybe Sunday morning I'd wake up, have a breakfast burrito. It'd be like, it wasn't so much a cheat as it was like be a normal person for the day, which to most of us in fitness would be cheating, because people can eat ridiculous. People start the day off with a muffin and a donut or a bagel. And a lot of us that have been in fitness for a long time, that have eaten tilapia as the first thing we've eaten in the morning, we just think that that is such a huge departure from the way that we normally eat. But when I was younger, some of that worked, but it got worse and worse. Saturday and Sunday became like full-on events. It became a full-on like cheat party. And if I'm being honest, my nutrition discipline during the week wasn't so good that it warranted 2 days of going completely crazy on food. And I think that without completely fasting for 3 days or 5 days, I think that there's really not much you can do to warrant 2 days of an onslaught of food. Maybe we can say, if you did a diet prep, or if you recently lost, let's say that you recently lost like 30 pounds over the last 6 months. Well, okay, well in that case, you clearly have been calorie deprived and been deprived of some stuff for a little while. And I've done stuff like this many times where I take 2 or 3 days off. I haven't done this in maybe a year or two, but I used to every year take like 5 days completely off of having any rules with nutrition and eating some of the stuff that I enjoyed when I was a kid. And not all of it was completely reckless. Not all of it was like full-on cheats, but it was just normal people stuff, burritos and sandwiches, maybe a little pizza. And I'd still try to keep the protein high because I'm a meathead. But you can see how tricky this can get, because as you're listening to this, as you're watching this, you're like, why don't you just count calories? Or you're mentioning, why don't you just do this? Or just buy Greg Doucette's cookbook. Or, you're probably shouting at me. You're probably angry at me. And again, remember, I'm mentioning all these things a little bit more as like a conversation, a little bit more as a question. These aren't real statements. It's really hard to define whether you need a cheat meal or not. But what I would say is, if you have a cheat meal every day, it needs to be accounted for in some way. So if during the week your diet was meh, right? And then you have a big cheat meal on Saturday, and that cheat meal turns into you having a little extra, more so than just the one meal. Now we should start thinking a little bit about acquiring an eating disorder. No, we should think a little bit about going eye for an eye. So this is where we can exercise our way into something, we could fast our way into something, or we can exercise and or fast our way out of stuff. I wrote about this in my book that I wrote a long time ago called The War on Carbs. In The War on Carbs, I stated fast going into a cheat and fast going out of a cheat. Remember, these are more questions than they are actual answers and actual statements. But that might be useful for you. Ask yourself that question. Would that be a pretty good idea for me? And I'm not saying that you should fast for 24 hours or 48 hours going into a cheat meal. I'm not proposing that at all. I'm allowing that to be up to you. So if it was me in a particular case, such as yesterday, which was my running partner's birthday, happy birthday, Angel. That's my brother's girlfriend, and they invited me over their house. She made some pasta. She made some lean ground beef meat sauce that also had sausage in it. So now we got carbohydrates and fats in there. Pasta's delicious. And some garlic bread. And of course, everyone's favorite ice cream cake. I'm not much of a cake person, but if you have an ice cream cake, I am going to eat it 150% of the time. And I'm going to give you my best effort on that every single time. I can guarantee you that. So what did I do? I lifted on that day. I ran on that day. And I didn't fast, but I also made sure I had good nutrition. Before I went over their house, I had a pretty good sized salad that had chicken. It had like blue cheese. I threw a little bit of olive oil on there, a little balsamic vinegar on there as well. Ate that. It was a pretty damn big size salad. In addition to that, I had some canned oysters, and I also had some canned, I think it was mackerel. Can't quite remember exactly. But I got in my protein. I got in the fats that I want. I got myself taken care of. I did all the right stuff for me. And this is what I advise a lot of you to do when you go to a nice restaurant, or you go to a restaurant where it's more than just you going to your local restaurant that you go to all the time. It's something that maybe took a little bit of extra effort for you to go to, and you're really looking forward to it. I don't look at going out to eat the same anymore. I'm not going out to have the food marvel me and dazzle me. That is a little bit part of it, especially when you're at a nicer place. Your expectations are going to be a little bit higher. But I'm there for the companionship. I'm there for the other people that I'm there with. I'm there to, break bread with people, enjoy a meal, right? But I'm going to take care of my nutrition before I go. That way, if I want to participate in somebody saying, hey, the lobster mac and cheese is unbelievable, you have to try it here, which, by the way, anything mac and cheese is always going to be good at every place. I don't know why we fall for that. But anyway, if you feel that you should indulge in some of these things, if you do so, but you did damage control beforehand and you're going to do some damage control afterwards, there's no damage that can be done. And this is where we get into this category of, I am a diet and fitness ninja, home. And you can handle the weight of anything. It doesn't matter if they bring out a cheesecake platter. It doesn't matter if you had the ribeye and you had all these intentions of being carnivore at this meal, but they had some loaded baked potato thing that you felt like you had to participate in. At this point, it doesn't matter because you nailed down your nutrition beforehand. Again, we do have to be cautious and make sure this doesn't cause a cascade of unhealthy habits to be unlocked. That's what it feels like sometimes, right? Doesn't it feel like boom, it gets unlocked, and then you're kind of just sitting there with all this food in your hand and on your face and stuff, and you're like, it's almost like you're a serial killer. Like you just broke someone's neck and killed someone, and you have no idea that you did it. You're like, man, I blacked out. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Come on, don't judge me. You're like, hey, that was pretty dark. It happens to the best of us. So you're gonna have to really monitor like who you are. I think part of knowing who you are is knowing who you're not. You might not be that guy. You might not be that girl that can just snack on something a little bit and go, and then put the rest of it back, or to, crumple up the bag and stick one of those little things on the top of it. If it was my house and I lived in it by myself, there would be nothing to put stuff back in the pantry with, because there would never be a reason to put anything back. I pop the lid of the Ben & Jerry's off the top and I throw it directly in the garbage. No intent ever of not just smoking that, not just finishing that. So if you know that you're going to end up in this crazy caloric surplus and you're going to get caught up in not only cheating for the day, but sometimes it gets the mind racing even the next day. I noticed for myself that when I was doing ketogenic diets fairly strictly, that an influence of what I call flipping your taste buds inside out. So let's say it's bone broth, ribeyes, omelets, all these savory and delicious foods, but there's no There's no like real sweetness. There's not a lot of crunch. And then all of a sudden, you have this influence of a crunch. You have this influence of something sweet. You just flipped your taste buds the other direction. Brushing your teeth is a good example of flipping your taste buds in a particular direction. Brush your teeth and then try to eat the best steak in the world that's cooked by the best chef in the world. It's not going to taste the same. Eat a couple Doritos before the best chef in the world prepares the best meal in the world. It's not going to taste the same. It's not going to taste remotely the same. And so you want to be cautious with, if you are going to cheat on your diet, you want to actually be considerate of what it is you're cheating with. Is the thing you're going to cheat with, is it going to be such a party in your mouth that you can't handle it, and that your brain goes haywire, and that you end up, eating a box of cereal, you end up eating a pint of ice cream, you end up, nowadays we got DoorDash. When I was fat, we didn't have DoorDash. Thank God, because I would have been, instead of 3:30, I would have been 4:30. It's too much to actually drive to the store and be a little shamed by all the candy and all the crap that you're getting. I got a funny story on that, by the way, real quick. Hanging out with Will Harris, AKA World Harris. 24-inch arms, one of the biggest bodybuilders that I've ever seen. When I was 21, 22 years old, I used to train with Will. Will worked at a bar that was down the street from the bar that my wife and I met at, Sharky's. My brother and I worked there. And we also worked there with John Cena, which is another weird story, probably for some other time. But my brother and I think my brother was having some car trouble at the time. I was a bum. I didn't have a license. I didn't have a car. And so I just always have my brother chauffeur me around all the time. He didn't really care that much that I was a dirtbag like that. Anyway, my brother had an issue with his car. We needed a ride from Big Will. So we're driving home, and Will's like, I hope you guys don't mind. He's like, it's my cheat day today. And it's like 3 a.m, And we're like, oh yeah, same with us. We just wanted to be fat and join in on the fun. And this is before I got fat. I was probably a similar body weight that I am right now. But we go into this grocery store, and my brother and I decide, that's not a good idea. Like, we don't eat like Will. We don't train like Will. Will's a professional IFBB pro bodybuilder. He stays on point all the time. So my brother and I are like, let's play the smart route. Let's get some chicken and some beef for tomorrow, and we'll have a good clean day. So we put our stuff up on the counter, and it goes to a little conveyor belt thing. It's like inching towards the person, and Will puts all his stuff down too, and it's just like tons of candy and tons of ice cream, just a crazy amount, chocolate covered everything pretty much. And the lady kind of looks up at us, and she goes, oh my God. She goes, this is a crazy amount of food. And I look at my brother, and we kind of look at each other, and then Will goes, yeah. He goes, it's unbelievable what these two guys eat. He threw us under the bus. He totally killed us. And there he was, all veined out and all shredded. So that lady thought that the meat was for him, and that all that junk food was for us. But hey, lady in the grocery store, I think it was the Ralph's on the PCH on the way to Venice. That wasn't our food. That was for Will. We don't eat like that. Will's a monster and eats like a pig. So anyway, back to the story at hand here. I think it's important that we, learn who you are. For Will, in that particular story, in that particular situation, he's a pro bodybuilder. He knew what he was doing. He knew how to kind of take advantage of these bigger caloric days. And for you, for a lot of us, we're not so strict during the week that we really get that big payoff.
I want to have a serious conversation with you about your balls, and I'm being serious here. On this podcast, we talked about a lot of things to help men improve the health of their penis, because it's important. And your balls have very thin skin. This is true. You can touch them right now, and it's pretty thin. Women do a lot of things to take care of their vaginal health, and men, we don't really think about the things that we put right directly on our balls, like are boxers. A lot of popular brands out there have chemicals that are literally touching your balls. Think about this. When you're in the gym sweating, when you're at work sitting, when you're doing all these things could be permeating into your scrotum. Things like BPA, phthalates, pesticides, insecticides, toxic dyes, toxic fertilizers, formaldehyde, all of which could lead to and could exacerbate lower testosterone, erectile dysfunction, and potential infertility. That's why I've partnered with NADS. And NADS is made with 100% organic cotton and no toxic dyes. So instead of putting just anything on your manhood, it's a good idea to get your hands on some NADS. And Andrew, how can they get it?
Yes, that's over at nadsunder.com. That's NADS under.com. And at checkout, enter promo code PowerProject to save 15% off your entire order. Again, that's at nadsunder.com. Links in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
You know, if you think about, sometimes you hear about celebrities that get cheated on. You hear like J-Lo gets cheated on. You're like, damn, J-Lo's pretty hot. Why would a guy cheat on her? The same scenario may apply to your food. It's like, your food's pretty sexy, your food's pretty seductive. You have a lot of good options with your food. It seems like everything you need is there, but you still chose to have this cheat day or this cheat meal or this cheat weekend that maybe you didn't need, or maybe you could handle it in a more reasonable way. Do you personally have a reasonable way about you? Can you personally be rational with your food? Or you're someone that tends to be irrational? If it's gonna spark this monster inside of you to come out and to wanna eat so much more food, you gotta be really careful and really cautious with how you proceed on this. I'm still on the fence on a lot of this. I don't know if you should have a scheduled cheat or if you should let it happen periodically. In my opinion, I think it's best just to let the day happen and let each and every day go onward. But my overall consensus on this is, if that you live the code, you're exercising frequently, you are you have other healthy habits, you're getting some good sleep in there, you're doing a bunch of other healthy things, then I don't think it matters too much if you have a cheat. But what we have to think about again is, if you give yourself too much leeway, is that going to make you sway way too far one way or the other? It's nice to get locked in. There's no better feeling than getting locked into your training, your running, your nutrition. There's no better feeling than when you just dial all that in perfectly and some random person walks by you and say, hey, how's it going? You're like, great. I feel great. It's rare that people hear that response, but sometimes you can't help but say that when you're literally feeling great, because all that stuff is dialed in. So I want to encourage you to push further, to push harder. 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, 8 days, 12 days, 14 days. That's not really that crazy for you to be locked in for that many days. Now, if you start getting locked in for like 3 months, okay, maybe there's time for a little reprieve. Maybe there's time to do something a little bit different. But I do think overall that what I mentioned earlier, I think leeway is the way. You want to be able to have some leeway. And how can you have leeway in your diet? How can you have this reframing, this reinterpretation of what you used to consider to be a cheat? You can do so by it no longer being a cheat. It's maybe something that's slightly off plan. It's maybe not written in your list of foods to eat, which your list of foods to eat should be a category of some different types of meat, a category of some different vegetables probably, a category of some different fruits. And then this is where we tend to see some differences. Some people like dairy, some people don't like dairy. And there's gonna be, a bunch of other differences as we kind of, go across the board. But for the most part, diets should be pretty similar in terms of people eating natural foods, not a lot of processed foods. But we do have those processed foods are sitting in our head. Those taste buds are there from the time that we're a kid. I was talking earlier about Doritos. And even just the mention of a Dorito, or even just the mention of a McDonald's cheeseburger, you know exactly how that tastes. You know exactly how the French fries taste from McDonald's versus how they taste from In-N-Out, and so forth. We are so versus like you don't know the difference between getting a steak from one grocery store or another. You may not even notice from one brand to another. It might have to be more when we're talking about just straight meat and things that don't have as much ingredients in it. It might have to be from one brand to another, or might have to be not necessarily brand, but from grass-fed, grass-finished beef is going to have a certain flavor to it versus grain-fed beef. But it'll have to be something probably pretty drastic, or it'd have to be almost a completely different cut of steak for you to even recognize it. And so we don't have the same, sometimes there's not the same excitement because there's not the same exact feeling from eating some of these foods all the time. Years ago, I was helping my brother-in-law out with his diet, and he has forever kept a lot of the body weight off that he lost, but he also has regained some of it. And more recently, I've seen him out walking, and something that resonated with him and stuck in his head, and hopefully it continues to stay stuck in his head forever, is this idea of forever. Your diet is forever. And people might think that I hop from one diet to another, and I do. And the reason why I do that is because I'm agnostic when it comes to these different diets. I think there's many different forms of diets that work really well, and I love to sometimes implement some of the things of a bodybuilding diet. I love to sometimes implement something from a keto diet. I love to do different types of diets, but you know how long your diet's gonna be going for? Forever. You don't get an opportunity to just be completely off your diet unless you perhaps have a good understanding of the food that you're consuming and of your energy out, and you're decent at regulating your body weight. Or maybe body weight just in general is not a deal for you because of hunger signals. There's plenty of people, you think about, someone like Snoop Dogg. He's always been pretty thin. I would say naturally been thin, right? Who the hell even really knows what that means? But I do think it should be pretty agreeable across the board that some people are born bigger than others. Some people are born literally to carry around more body fat than another person. Some people literally seem to be born to hold a little bit more muscle mass than another person. We see this when people diet for bodybuilding shows, and we see examples of this kind of all over the place, but it's sort of ignored. No one really wants to talk about it that much. But I think it's actually kind of helpful in a way to understand that some people, in some cases, for some things, sometimes just have a harder go of it. They sometimes just have a harder time of it. That was something I needed to come to grips with as a kid. I had an issue with learning, and I needed to understand that there's no reason to have this make you a victim, but there is a reason to think about this a little bit more. Okay, Mark, for you, you might have to read something 7 times to get the same out of it as someone that read it once or twice. Big fucking deal. Let's all cry about it, right? The same thing could be said when it comes to nutrition. The same thing could be said of some people being able to lose body fat. For some reason, there are some people, you sometimes see an 8-year-old kid who's really heavy, a 7-year-old kid, a 4-year-old kid. Is it that person's fault? Is it the parents' fault? Are these bad parents? Oh, we got to be reasonable here. Maybe, or are we just born a little different? There's some nasty shit in this world that we don't know anything about. Childhood leukemia comes to mind. Is that the parents' fault? We would never want to blame that on the parents, right? Obesity sometimes is just some shit that we don't exactly, I know that people are it comes from too many calories, There are people that struggle, let's just leave it at this, right? There's people that struggle with their body weight way more than other people. Is it just a hunger signal? Maybe it is. Who really gives a shit on what it is? Let's figure out a way to communicate back and forth in a way that's going to be helpful, that's going to allow you, and you to lose weight, because it may not be the same for everybody. Even though it should be the same, even though if we put everyone on a chicken breast and broccoli diet, everyone could, should, and probably would lose weight, people are going to lose weight differently, and there's going to be some people that are going to say, that diet's disgusting, I cannot stick with it. And we need to be compassionate a little bit, and we need to have more knowledge so we can share information of saying, who told you that chicken breast and broccoli was the only way to really lose weight? Oh, they told you that was a way to lose weight. Ah, I got it. Fasting can be a way to lose weight, right? There's so many different diets. There's so many different options. Why would we just choose and just settle in on one? While I do think it's a good idea to practice and to follow one particular diet for a period of time, I think it's also great to expand your horizon and to utilize some different diets. Maybe in your exploration of utilizing different diets, you'll end up where I'm at. I feel like I've done so many different diets, and that I'm on so many different diets, and that I utilize some of the amazing benefits from some diets while also avoiding some of the pitfalls of some diets. Keto diet comes to mind. Even in my book, The War on Carbs, which was written a long time ago, I talk about a version of the ketogenic diet that once you do keto for a while, you could start to introduce some carbohydrates. Why would we do that? Well, maybe it's not a great idea to be in ketosis in perpetuity. Maybe it would be a better, maybe it'd be a more long-lasting diet. I do understand some people can follow a keto diet forever. I kind of always felt like I was one of them. I enjoy the diet and still feel like adherence to it is not a problem. However, I learned some interesting things in doing a keto diet. I learned that bumping up next to keto was better than actually being full keto. I learned the same thing from a carnivore diet. I didn't notice any exponential difference in my performance in the gym, and didn't notice any exponential difference with my aesthetics of my body, of my build, of my physique by being more carnivore. So I added in fruit, right? And then it's like, oh, you're not on a carnivore diet, and you abandon it. It's like, well, okay, I don't know, like what percentage of meat do I need to eat for you to consider me to be carnivore? Is it 100? For me, I like to use the functionality of vegetables. I think vegetables can be great. I think plants have so many properties in them. I mean, we're just learning that plants can really talk to each other and communicate with each other. We're learning all kinds of different stuff about plants, but I think some of the things that might make a plant bad for you are also probably some of the things that make a plant good for you. You hear people talk about oxalates or these different things that could, irritate your immune system or irritate, autoimmune disorders and all these different things. And I think that might be appropriate for some people to have a stance like, plants are going to kill me, not plants are going to kill you. Plants are going to kill me, and I should probably keep my distance from them. And maybe that's true for some plants, and maybe that's true for some people. But there also seems to be an overwhelming amount of literature showing some advantages of plants, showing some advantages of fermented foods. We're learning more and more about this all the time. So why just try to stay in one category and think one way? Some of the recent things I've been sharing stuff about fasting. I've been sharing things about loading up on protein. I've been sharing things about maybe because I was a low carb person for so long, I'm sharing some information of like, hey, let's maybe watch the fat calories too, because if you want to be shredded and want to be lean and want to have some good veins, you might want to pay attention to the overall fats that you're consuming, because it's easy to jack your calories way up. But this is the stuff that I'm doing now. It's not the stuff I was doing then, and it's not the stuff I'm going to always continue to do, because it's going to be ever evolving. And if you look at some of the stuff that Mike Dolce has been preaching for a long time, he's like, hey, this is garbage. Why really subscribe to one thing? Why only subscribe to one way when we can subscribe to a bunch of different things? We could utilize these different techniques. I don't think Mike is a huge fan of a ketogenic diet, but I bet you he's probably used some version of it sometimes to help some of his guys cut for UFC fights and stuff like that. So there might be appropriate times to utilize these things, and even coming off a cheat, it might be good to say, oh my God, I ate enough carbohydrates to feed an entire army. The body stores carbohydrates pretty good. So for the next 3 days after Thanksgiving, I'm not going to eat that much carbohydrate. Or a day or two in preparation, and a day or two after, you're going to sort of deplete yourself of some of those carbohydrates via your workout, via your run, via the style of eating that you do. Hopefully, this video has been successful at confusing you even further, because that's exactly what I want to do. I want to challenge your ideas. I want to challenge your beliefs, and I want you to try to figure out, is a cheat good for you? Is it bad for you? Nowadays, the way that I'm thinking and the different people who've had influences on me, I think a cheat is both good and bad. It could be useful for some, it could be detrimental to others. You got to kind of mind how you do it in accordance to who you are. If you've had cheat meals in the past and you've been able to continue to lose or gain weight, whatever thing you were going for, then by all means continue onward. But if you've really struggled because just that little influence of a cheat threw you so sideways you weren't able to get back on track again, then maybe cheating's not for you. People sometimes will say, I hear people sometimes say, on the wagon, off the wagon. And I always think that that's a funny thing, because I don't know what means what. I did look it up at one point, but I don't remember exactly what it meant. But anyway, whether you're on the wagon or off the wagon, you need to figure out what's going to get you on the best path possible. The more that you do, the more that you can handle, and the more that you learn how to interpret the different things that you're interacting with each and every day, the better you're going to be able to handle life stresses, whether they're positive or negative. And when you're able to do that, you're able to have mastery over your actions. But it can be very difficult to have mastery over your actions when it's overridden by your gut or by your brain due to the types of foods that you're eating. So be careful out there. Strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye.
Hi there. I know you guys like this video, so check this one out.